The Communist Party of China begins its major congress this weekend that's all but certain to hand Xi Jinping a third five-year term. It's a move that puts him on the path to becoming leader for life, for better or worse, richer or poorer. Because China under Xi has had its share of milestones and challenges, as DW's Clifford Coonan reports.
Xi Jinping's political journey has been epic. From political exile during the upheavals of the Cultural Revolution to becoming the most powerful Chinese leader since Mao Zedong in the 1970s. China has been transformed since the Mao era from a poor, inward-looking country into a global superpower and the world's second-largest economy. Analysts believe Xi goes into the Congress in a strong position, and his appointment for a third term as party chief gives him more political muscle. In the past, the party congress in China was similar to elections in the West. There were many factions, many struggles, and many disagreements. This is likely going to be the first one without factional struggles since the establishment of the Communist Party of China, which means that Xi Jinping has taken control of everything. The authoritarian Xi has taken a hardline approach to China's relations with the West, particularly over self-ruled Taiwan. Xi wants Taiwan to revert to Beijing's rule by 2049, the century of the foundation of the People's Republic. He's not ruled out taking the island by force. His reluctance to condemn Russia's invasion of Ukraine has antagonized the West, and his efforts to grab territory in the South China Sea have angered China's neighbors. Relations with the United States are at their lowest ebb for years, while tensions between the EU and China could escalate if Xi strengthens his commitment to a confrontational foreign policy. While the rest of the world is easing COVID-19 restrictions, China's authorities have intensified their efforts to contain outbreaks, with strict lockdowns, mass testing and lengthy quarantines. This zero-COVID approach is one of Xi's landmark policies. It's also turning into the most potent test of his leadership so far. At least one person was arrested in Beijing for hanging a protest banner in the city. Such protests are highly unusual. Economic growth under Xi is suffering, and fears of a global recession triggered by the war in Ukraine have hit confidence. Any hint of China's future direction will be followed closely around the world. A burning question hanging over the Congress is succession. Who comes after Xi?
That report by DW's Clifford Coonan, who joins me now in the studio. So let's follow up on that last line of your report. There doesn't seem to be a succession plan of any kind.
Well, it's been very interesting in recent years in China. I mean, under Mao Zedong, he did have people who looked like his anointed successors. Some of them were eased out, like Zhou Enlai. Others died in plane crashes, like Lin Biao. And then we had Jiang Zemin, who followed on from Deng Xiaoping, and Hu Jintao. They sort of formed an arc as well. But then suddenly with Xi Jinping, who again could be put in that camp with the successors of going all the way back to Deng Xiaoping, but he seems to be behaving very differently. So it's very difficult to actually draw an arc here. What he's doing now is taking full control. He's entrenching himself at the top of the party, and any of his allies seem to be just like people on the standing committee of the Politburo, rather than people you would think that would be the next leader, because they're very much of similar age or similar background. But there's no one emerging who looks like they could be someone who would be his next successor.
Now, you touched on a number of challenges that China is facing in your report. Can you dive into any one of them and talk a little bit more about it?
Well, I think zero COVID and the economy, I mean, it's two issues, but they're very closely linked. I think that's one thing that's really struck me recently is how he's sticking to the zero COVID policy of these strict lockdowns, and it's doing immense harm to the economy. People can't get to work, people can't get out to shop, and people can't make things to export. It's really damaging the economy. And I think this is one area where people looking at China often think that there's a very pragmatic approach to things, but actually is a very ideological approach to things, that the Communist Party and the Communist Party leader, Xi Jinping, views things very much in ideological terms, and this has become part and parcel of his rule, of his ethos. So he's very much pushing the zero COVID policy, and the effect that that might have on the economy is only secondary to him.
Right. I mean, zero COVID is kind of anti-science, and that really begs the question of, like, there really are no challengers to him, are there, to question his policies or anything like that?
No, I mean, we had an incident where there was a protest in Beijing recently with someone hanging a banner. That was just in the last couple of days, but that was presumably an isolated incident. A few weeks ago, there were strong rumours about a possible coup, and those things emerge every single time that there's a period of radio silence coming from the government headquarters. But there doesn't seem to be anyone. Normally you would expect to hear of someone who is emerging as a challenger. We had Xi Jinping in the run-up 10 years ago when Xi Jinping took power. It was clear that Xi Jinping was a possible contender there, and he was very quickly moved aside. So there's been no similar challengers emerging.
Yeah, I mean, he's very much a mystery man. So on that note, I want to take a look at Xi Jinping's story, his background, and his rise to power, and then we'll follow up.
It was this moment that elevated Xi Jinping above Chinese leaders before him. In 2017, at the end of his first five-year term, the Communist Party Congress voted to have Xi's philosophy written into the constitution, raising him to the same level as the father of Chinese communism, Mao Zedong.
Our country is at an important point of strategic opportunity in its development.
Xi was born in Beijing in 1953, the son of a high-ranking party official. But in the 1960s, his father fell foul of Chairman Mao and the communist leadership and was thrown into prison. The young Xi was sent to the countryside for political re-education and hard labour for 7 years. But instead of turning against the Communist Party, he embraced it and worked hard to rise to the top. In November 2012, the relatively unknown Xi Jinping was named General Secretary of the Communist Party. A few months later, he succeeded Hu Jintao as President of the People's Republic of China. Xi set about pursuing what he hailed as the China Dream, to turn China into the world's dominant power. Under Xi, China has become more assertive on the international stage, fueled by a growing patriotism at home, much of it based around Xi Jinping's image as China's strongman. But Xi has also overseen increased limitations on freedoms, expanding online censorship and cracking down on opposition voices. And leaked documents link Xi directly to human rights abuses against the Muslim minority Uyghurs. In 2018, the two-term limit on the presidency was removed, paving the way for a third term in office and allowing Xi to effectively remain in power for life.
I mean, power for life. Why does he want to hold on to this power? And do you think he has China's best interests in mind?
You know, I think he thinks he does. He definitely has a version of what he thinks is best for China in his mind. Power is something that is obviously appealing, and there's definitely that element. He does enjoy his powerful role, but I do think that he thinks he is doing the best for the country. And I think what motivates him, I mean, he comes from party royalty. His father was a key figure. He grew up in it. It was mentioned there in the report. He was sent to during the Cultural Revolution. He was sent down to Shanxi province, and where he lived in caves, and he even turned that struggle into something that appears to have motivated him driven him forward to take on this role, because he hasn't acted according to the way people expected. As we were saying earlier, he's basically very much his own man, and I think what drives him, there's obviously this will to power, but I think definitely he thinks that he is doing what's best for China, but he very much believes that he is the best person to do it.
Yeah, he's quite different from his father, who is rather a liberal, all things considered. So, third term, possibly life term after that, but what might we expect in the next 5 years?
I think once he's, I think what we're seeing at the moment in China is a lot of issues that are kind of, you know, they're being sort of kicked into touch, that they're basically not, they're not acting on a lot of things until this Congress is over. This has been such an issue for him that he wants to get this done and dusted. And then I think he's going to try and slowly address some issues. With the economy, we had the property crisis, which is, you know, based on Evergrande and the other property developers, which have massive debts. That is a percentage of the total economy, and that's a real threat. The whole debt problem is something that he's going to have to address. And I think possibly once he's secured his third term, he can move on things like zero COVID. I think he'll have more flexibility, because then he can certainly relax. I mean, scientifically, there are reasons why he can do it, but as you said, he's not thinking scientifically when it comes to this zero COVID policy. And I think he's going to entrench his position. You have to think that he is going to start thinking about a successor, that someone will emerge. I mean, we have no clues as yet, as we've said. So I think a lot of it is going to be about, it's going to be more of the same, but he will have to move a bit quicker on certain issues.
Yeah, it's been really interesting, because the last few years, China has really kind of been in suspended animation. Clifford Coonan, thank you so much for joining us, and I'm sure we'll be seeing a lot of you over the next week or so.